Israel.
Let's record and we'll move along. I'm so happy to see all of you. Ryan, when was your last visit to Israel? Oh, you're on
Okay,
mute. Oh,
can you hear me?
now, yeah.
I've never been. Me
Oh,
and my son got as far as Athens, Greece, and there was a roadblock. But me and my son are planning on being in the land this Purim. So,
you mean
Wow.
like in 6 weeks?
yes, sir.
Wow, please, let's connect.
I'd love that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't love it. No, of course I would love it. That would be fantastic. Wow. Okay, this is exciting. Very exciting that all of you are considering and would love to be here, or you've already been here, you want to come back again. I think that's fabulous. So, how you doing, Mr. Stephen Malkiel? Doing all right? Did you want to spit out that cherry pit first, or you're okay? You do what you need to do. All right, there you go. Okay. Oh, you're doing an EKG. Lovely while you're driving. Okay. Hey, so let's begin where we left off last time. First, let me ask, anybody have any questions, comments, observations since the last time about anything we studied or anything you've been curious about since last Wednesday? If you have, speak it now or forever hold your peace, as they say. Okay. So anytime you have something to say, please let me know that you'd like to share something. So we are, if you are in the Chabad um, Pirke Avot, Ethics of the Fathers link, this is chapter 5 and number 5, Mishnah or teaching number 5. Um, as you can imagine, before every Wednesday's class, I review my notes, and there are some notes that I have on certain teachings that I find more exciting, more relevant than others, and these are some of them. Some of them that I find really like I can't wait to teach it. That kind of a excitement, enthusiasm about it. So, chapter 5, Mishnah or teaching number 5. We have another anonymous teaching. We've had anonymous teachings. There were 10 this or with 10 things, X happened, whatever. Many of these opening teachings in chapter 5 have numbers. There are 4 things that, there are 7 things that. So this continues these anonymous teachings that begin with the number 10. This time enumerating the 10 miracles performed for our ancestors in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. 10 miracles that were identified in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Some say not just in the Holy Temples in Jerusalem, but also in the sanctuary, what's called in the Hebrew the Mishkan, the Mishkan. Also, these were performed even back then while the Israelites traveled through the desert for the decades following their exodus from Egypt. I just want to say a word about this idea of the 40 years. Very often, when I see translations or when I see people talking about the topic of the 40 years, it's often called they were wandering for 40 years. And I always have a very strong reaction because wandering sounds like a pinball machine where you just, foing it and the ball just goes anywhere it wants to. So to me, that's the connotation of wandering. And my better understanding of what that 40-year period was, it wasn't wandering, like every place had its point and purpose. And there are books written on it from Torah scholar perspectives where they describe all the 42, I think it's 42 or so, all the 42 places they stopped between leaving Egypt and finally entering the land of Israel. And what was the point and purpose of each particular stop? What did God want to teach at that location? Um, Now, sometimes they just stayed overnight in one location. Sometimes they stayed a year and a half at one location. So there were different time periods of staying in various locations on their way to the land of Israel. but I often thought that the word wandering sounds aimless, purposeless. You know, it's a way to get there. No, it's not a way to get there. God had a specific plan in mind. These are the 42 spots. This is what I'd like you to learn in these spots or learn from being in these 42 different locations. So to me, I vie away from that word wandering and say traveled. I traveled for 40 years. Uh, so now let's mention a few of the miracles. Some of the miracles they mention are very Jewish specific, Jewish law specific, etc. And I like to share more of the universal teachings and more of the universal messages. So um, there are 10, we'll probably hit 8 of them. And the other 2, again, are just very Jewish ceremonial law specifics, which you can study on your own if that was your interest. So here are some of the miracles, and they'll tell you what I think is the most meaningful of these 8 that we're going to study regarding one of these miracles. One of these miracles for me stands out above all the others. So just a word about the holy temples. In Jerusalem, a 30-second history that you maybe probably are familiar with. The first holy temple stood for about 400 plus years, 410, 420, something like that. And then it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE. I think the opera Nabucco, there's an opera Nabucco. I don't remember who wrote it or composed it. It was all about Nebuchadnezzar. Interesting, if you ever want to try to get it on YouTube. So that stood for about 400 and some years. The second temple, after the first one was destroyed, started to be rebuilt 70 years later. It stood again for 400 or 420 years, and then it was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. Interestingly, according to our sages, the second temple did not contain several key holy instruments that were housed in the first one. It lacked, if I remember reading correctly somewhere, 5 elements that the first temple had, but the second temple did not. The most important of which it lacked, the second temple, and most surprising, is that the rabbis teach us it did not contain the Shekhinah, which is God's, we understand that as the concentrated and palpable presence of God, something you could almost touch, taste, feel, etc. And that was missing. So you would say, wow, if the Shekhinah, this palpable presence of God, is kind of like a battery that makes everything run when you put it in the battery, if it's missing the battery, what is the point of going to the second holy temple when it doesn't have the battery in it? You know? Uh, and I'm looking around my living room here. Everything that has a wire also has a battery in case the wire doesn't work or whatever. But what is the value of a battery put in a clock if there's no battery in the clock? So the clock will be right twice a day, but we need to have it right more than twice a day. So what could possibly be the measure of importance of the second holy temple if it's missing the Shekhinah, this battery, which was so crucial to the first holy temple? So here's the way I would answer that question. Um, I've been to Hungary twice. This is where my parents were born. Um, this is where my grandparents lived, were born, etc., in Hungary. And I went to visit twice, once with my parents and my sister, once with my wife. Um, and it pretty much explains why most of the day I am very Hungary, which you might have guessed. So in Hungary, there's a synagogue called the Dohani Synagogue. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Some people call it the Dohani. The pronunciation in Hungarian is the Dohani Synagogue. It seats about 3,000, I think. Beautiful, drop-dead, gorgeous edifice. Beautiful on the inside. I think right now, it used to be an Orthodox synagogue. Now it's a Neolog synagogue, which means It has combinations of conservative and reform practices that are done and prayers that are done there. So if you would say, let's say that the Dohani synagogue no longer had any prayer services, nobody used it. There is a caretaker there. If anybody wants to see it, he's got the key. You can walk in and spend a half hour. So you would say, well, if nobody uses it anymore, of what value is it? What replacement of the Shekhinah could you possibly be having in a place that's got nobody in there for prayers, social, communal events? What's the importance of it? And the truth of the matter is, you just walk over the threshold of the Dohani synagogue, and if your jaw doesn't drop, just the aesthetics, the beauty, the awe, the reverential feeling you get in there, nobody would go in there and start screaming or start playing ball. You know, it's empty. Why can't I play ball here? You can't play ball here because look at the place. You know what I'm saying? Look at it. You can't leave the Dohani synagogue without saying, "Oh my gosh, who did this? This is incredible." And you would sit there for a half hour and you would get something out of it, even though nobody's using it, nobody's used it for the last 10 years. But there's an unmistakable something going on there, even though no people, no events, no assemblies, no meetings, no prayers. Something's going on there, even though it's empty of all of that. So that's what I would say was similar with the Second Holy Temple. It lacked that battery, it lacked that Shekhinah, but at the same time, you got there and you got something out of it. Something. May not have been a 10, but if you got an 8, that's good. 8 is worth it. Even a 4 is worth it. So, uh, and I think that's a decent analogy of what the value is of the Second Holy Temple, even though it's lacking that battery, if you will. So again, any questions, comments, just feel free to, yes, Patrick, do you want to unmute yourself?
Do you believe the temple will be rebuilt?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Did you want to take any time to answer that, Rabbi? Yeah,
Sorry, I know it's a big question.
it is a big question. So I'll just say a couple of words on it. We believe that there will be a third holy temple, called in Hebrew the Bayit Hashlishi, the third temple, the third house, if you will. We will believe that it will be built either as a precursor to the Messiah, or the Messiah will then spearhead the rebuilding of it. Today there is a strong movement, though not too loud. But whoever's talking about it is strong about it. That well, where's it going to be put today, and at what cost? At what cost are we going to rebuild the temple today, where we have the Al-Aqsa Mosque, we have the Dome of the Rock, which is, I hear, more of a social gathering place than a worship place. I may be wrong. Where do you put those? What are you going to do? Oh, let's blow those up and start building the Holy Temple. That's the moment my wife and I go into our safe room for the next year and a half with saltines and a bottle of water. At what expense, at what cost do you go just, march forward with your convictions and everything? But, and there are others that say, and in this I frankly believe for myself, that the moment we put down a cornerstone of a third holy temple, so no, we don't have to erase everything of it. A cornerstone of the third holy temple, I believe personally that that will attract God's attention in ways that it has not been attracted before. And from that cornerstone laying until the temple will be rebuilt, in my thinking, will be a small matter of time. That will be, in my head, God saying, now you're on the right track. Now you're on the right track, and watch what's going to happen now. Just stand back and see ye the power of God. I
Okay.
don't often quote Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandment movie where the water splits. Stand back and see ye the power of God. But I think the power of God will be very preeminent once that cornerstone goes up.
Amen.
So yeah, I believe in it. I believe we pray for it several times a day in the Jewish prayers. Let the house of God be rebuilt speedily and soon.
Amen.
It's a major choir piece with a cantor and a choir that's been sung for a long, long time. So that's a good question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry I don't have a more passionate response.
It was a good response.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Sure.
So when we were there, they had those flags um, of the third Beit Hamadosh. There's like a movement, which
Yes.
we can't get those in America. So if you have a friend or something, maybe you could put it in the thread where we can order.
Oh,
Maybe if you
okay.
would
You
like to
mean
get a
like,
few of those. Yeah, we'd like to have a few of those for our houses over here.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and then
I hope you have a safe room and saltines and a bottle of water.
well, there are consequences for everything in life. So, but
Yeah,
I'm
for
willing to
sure.
take that consequence.
Okay.
And then, so just real quick, uh, Brooke and I was together this weekend. We were having a, midrash, some friends. But this concept of Messiah Bene Yosef, right?
Yeah.
Would be killed in this temple. And I was talking with somebody, and they said that, well, the second temple really didn't count because, as you just said, the glory wasn't there. And so this that really bothered me because and their faith tradition, they were saying, well, it didn't count. And I was like, what do you mean count? So like, uh, do you, in your, like opinion, do you find that it very much did matter, that temple very much did play a part in
Sure.
where we're at now, like eschatology wise?
Sure.
No matter how you may want to look at that. I'm trying to be very careful how I ask the question, but
That's
like,
okay.
because the Shekinah was not in there, do you, in your opinion, do you still feel that it was valuable? Like,
Absolutely.
at that
Absolutely.
time?
Yeah. Because it was still inspiring and engaging, and it still filled the need to be able to clinch a piece of holiness on earth, which was greater than any other place on earth in terms of its holiness, etc. Um, yeah, so I believe at least in that role, it definitely had value. It was a place marker, First holy temple destroyed, second one destroyed. We could say, wow, it's been 2,000 years already. When is the third one coming? And God says, it'll come, but it's according to my daily planner, and not anybody else's. I was teaching a group of seniors this morning, senior adults, some of whom are 95 and 100 years old, which is amazing. I can't quote Moses when I teach that group because some of the people were standing next to Moses at the time, and they would tell me he never said that. So but thank God they come out and they're hunched over or whatever. They need a walker, don't need a walker. Anyway, so this morning I was teaching them, and now I totally lost my train of thought having gone to those remarks. Um, yeah, I'll get it back in a moment, but okay, it it'll come back to me about why I mentioned them. Okay, it'll come back. So just reminding me if it doesn't come back, and I'm sure I'll try to focus. Here's some of the great miracles that occurred in the temple. Um, some of them may be surprising, some of them may be okay, very interesting. Number one, no woman ever miscarried from the aroma of the sacrificial meat. The aroma, the barbecue of it. Wow, all kinds of animals being sacrificed, etc. You can imagine there was a thick air of smoke and the fog of sacrificial animals. No woman ever miscarried because of uh, that aroma. So they likely had a craving for what probably smelled like a barbecue, but they couldn't eat it. They had a craving for that, like most people. If you're not a vegan or vegetarian, most people would say, "Oh, where's that barbecue? I need that." Wow. So these kinds of cravings that couldn't be satisfied, could cause a woman to miscarry, but in all of those years, it never happened. Now, I frankly never thought of the connection between non-fulfilled cravings and miscarriage. I I don't know enough about that to say, oh yeah, I get it. Anybody have any sense of that? Non-fulfilled cravings to lead to a miscarriage? I know it's probably never happened to any man. That much I can say. Maybe. But what the connection is, I don't know. I need to ask a professional about that. So that's the miracle number one. Not exactly earth-shattering, but it's a miracle. Another miracle, the sacred meat never spoiled or became putrid, nor was it ever infested with maggots. And remember, there was no refrigeration. So there's meat hanging around waiting to be, and it never got putrid, it never spoiled, it never got infested. It was as if it was always ready to be offered in a holy ceremonial way. Is that a big deal? They called it a miracle. And it probably is, considering there was no refrigeration. How do they keep it fresh and unharmed? I don't know. That's a miracle. Another one, no fly was ever seen in the slaughterhouse. There was a no-fly zone. The fly is a common carrier of microbes and bacteria in various types of diseases. So imagine if there were flies in the slaughterhouse, how that would exponentially affect people who are eating it, but it never happened, which is pretty amazing. Those of you who have ever been in Jerusalem at the Shuk, the outdoor market, Machane Yehuda, you go near the fruits and vegetables, especially during the summer, you're spending a good amount of time swatting flies away from the grapes or whatever. So imagine you walk through Machane Yehuda, the Shuk in Jerusalem during a very hot season, and you don't see a single fly. That's amazing. And that was called a miracle. This was a miracle. By the way, the Hebrew word for miracle is a nes, like N-E-S, nes. And the word nes also means a banner that might have a message. So when we say that something is a miracle, we are saying that this is something so unique that it causes people to notice it like they would a banner. And it's a banner that expresses God's supervision over this particular matter. So if there's no flies in the slaughterhouse, that's a banner, not just a miracle. It's a banner to tell you somebody's up there watching that there are no flies, or that there are no miscarriages, or that the meat doesn't become putrid and spoiled, etc. So in that sense, a miracle is a banner. You should know somebody's taking care of this above. Okay, here's another one. The rain never extinguished the fire of the wood pile on the altar. Now, here in Israel, nowadays, there is a predictable no rain period for more than half a year. It goes from about May through October. No rain. You don't need to keep your boots and umbrella near the door. There is no rain. So you would say, by the way, is there any rain? No rain. Predictable, doesn't happen. Did it ever happen? I don't know. But the word on the street is it never happened. You never have to worry about it. It just doesn't rain. And it simply it doesn't rain, but for 5 months of the year, like now, there can be light rain as well as torrential rain. And yet it never put out the fire on the altar. So is that a biggie? Assuming that God at that time in biblical history preferred animal sacrifices, and we can talk about why did he prefer that? Not now, but that's a good question. Why? Why did he want animals slaughtered to do what? But to the extent that it never put out the fires on the altar, that's miraculous. And it's a banner that somebody's up there watching and making sure that that doesn't happen. Another one, the wind never blew away the column of smoke. This was very interesting to me. that from all of the sacrifices that were brought, it created a column of smoke. So now you go to a barbecue or something like that, and there are plumes, right? Columns of smoke all over the place. Whatever smoke there was at the time created one vertical column of smoke. No diffusion on any side. It was just one, like a beam of smoke from the altar all the way towards heaven. That's an amazing thing. And if you stood near the altar and saw the smoke emanating from the sacrifices, it would appear as an unbroken column reaching heavenward. And this unbroken vertical column was a physical representation of the intense connection we make between heaven and earth. That's the connector, this column from down here all the way to up there. And it goes the other way too. It's the connection between God up there through that column, if you will, as a physical representation to the people down here on earth. So this was considered a tremendous miracle because wind would not blow it away, cementing in people's minds that this connection between us and God in us is firm, untouchable, and you can't do anything, as our girls used to say, to foof it away. Foofing is what you do with hot chicken soup when it's too hot. You foof it. That was our verb. So this column of smoke was never foofed, to use that language. In the temple in Jerusalem, and it just never happened. And perhaps it indicated that unbroken chain with which we are confident that we as humanity have between us and God in us. Another miracle that happened, no serpent or scorpion ever harmed anyone in the holy city of Jerusalem. This is not just the precinct of the Holy Temple, but in the entire city, which leads one to believe that these kinds of fatal bites by snakes or serpents, scorpions, whatever, they never stung anybody and caused death by their sting. And they seem to have been ubiquitous in Jerusalem. So if it never happened to anybody that they were harmed by the sting of it or the bite of it, that's a big miracle, and they're all over the place. So how come they didn't bite anybody? That's a banner. That's a banner saying there's somebody up there watching that it not happen. And Jerusalem protected its people, and no one was seriously injured there. And if they were, this is interesting to me, they would stare at the sacred walls of the city and be cured. How do you like that? Just by staring at the walls of the holy city, they would be cured if, by some happenstance, they were bitten, even though nobody was bitten, which leaves the possibility if somebody was, easy cure. Look at the walls of the old city and you'll be healed. So that would make an interesting prescription from any doctor today, Just take 2 Cotels and call me in the morning, kind of thing. That's an amazing. That's even better than some of the all the aspirins and Tylenols and all that kind of stuff. So to me, there's a few more, but the one I want to end off with this in terms of the miracles in the holy temples or in Jerusalem, or it even began in the sanctuary in the desert. This miracle is the one I find most inspiring to me. And it's something I learned from a senior rabbi I worked with in Baltimore, Maryland, who, until he pointed this out, I never really understood this teaching. It says that the people, due to the huge crowds, and especially during the pilgrimage festivals of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the masses of people were pressed together, shoulder to shoulder. You could hardly breathe. The parallel today is during the holidays of Sukkot and Passover, during the intermediate days, which are the less holy, but holy days, but less holy, less restrictions in the than in the beginning and end days. The bookend days are very holy days. The in-between days are less holy, but still holy, less restrictive, but still holy. If you go today during those time periods between Passover and Sukkot during those holidays, the plaza of the Kotel area, the Western Wall, jam-packed. Why? Because on those days, the Kohanim, all the Kohanes, all the priests, not the ones with the collar, all the ones from that came from Aaron the high priest, all of his descendants, on those days they stand in front of the Kotel, in front of the Western Wall, with their back to the Western Wall. They face the people. Their talit or prayer shawl is over their heads, so not to be distracted, and they bless the people who are gathered there with the blessing. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord be kind unto you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift his countenance over you and grant you peace. That is called in Hebrew the Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, of the Kohanes. And on those days when the Kohanes do it, there are thousands of Kohanes already, maybe, okay, hundreds, I think a few thousand. And then there's the people that come to be blessed. So if you're ever there on those intermediate days, it is choked with people. And that's just the front plaza in front of the hotel. Then there's a wall, and then behind it, there's another choked, oh, you can't breathe, but you can breathe. That would be another miracle if you that you can breathe while all the packed like sardines, if you can imagine that, subways, whatever. So what is the teaching saying? This is the important part. Even while people were pressed together like sardines, when they needed to bow and prostrate themselves, which was often in the precinct of the Holy Temple during certain prayers, they would prostrate themselves to the extent that they would lie on their stomach, hands fully extended, feet fully extended. They would lie there like a pancake as a sign of subservience to God. You know, today, when we Jews do it in certain prayers, we just bow. But back then, during certain prayers in the precinct of the temple, they would totally lie on their stomach as if to say, I am yours. I'm your messenger. I'm your tool. Use me as you need to. So what was the big miracle? So I haven't mentioned it yet. They were so jam-packed when they stood with each other, but when it came time to do the prostration, there was ample room. I think you can appreciate how those two don't necessarily go together. When they're standing next to each other, you can't breathe. There's no room. But when they needed to all prostrate themselves, all of a sudden, everybody had plenty of room to do that. They had their space to do that. And you say both of these cannot be true at the same time. You either have a lot of room or you have no room. So that was a miracle. That's an amazing miracle. When they needed to prostrate, they had plenty of room. So again, how could that be? So the simple answer is a miracle, plain and simple. From a spiritual point of view, it feels impossible. But here's what I like about this teaching. And again, I learned this from this senior rabbi that I worked with in Baltimore. Here's how he put it. He said, I can't explain it either. They seem to be mutually exclusive. Either you got a lot of room or no room. But he said, and here's his takeaway from this teaching about this particular miracle. He said, when people stand together and are so firm, that's what the teaching says, when people stood, unmovable because you couldn't move, because there's always people next to you and you have no space. If everyone is so firm and inflexible, if everyone is so set in their ways, so obstinate and rigid, you can't move, and unyielding, it feels like there's no room to breathe. It's like being suffocated. But when people can bow and bend and compromise to the greater good, when people can bow towards each other and acknowledge each other rather than remain stiff and rigid, then there's room for everybody. So when people are rigid, immovable, can't. I don't know if you remember seeing the movie by Mel Brooks, A History of the World, Part One. Anybody ever see that? I believe there was never a part two, but if you can catch part one, it's funny, little irreverent in certain point, the Inquisition, da, da, da. It has its several irreverent points. Um, but the reason I mention it is because they talk about the Inquisitor Torquemada. That name might be familiar, Torquemada. So Mel Brooks plays on this. He says, "Oh, one day we went to Torquemada and asked him, 'Can you kill less Jews today?' And he would say, 'No.' 'Can you be less torturous with them?' And he would say, 'No.' 'Torquemada, is there any way that we can blah blah blah?' And he would say, 'No.' So Mel Brooks would say to the camera, 'See, you can't torque him out of anything.'" That was his little pun. You can't torque him out of anything. That's why he was named Torquemada. So uh, when people are stiff and rigid and you can't torque them out of anything and they won't bend, they're unwilling, it's choking, it's suffocating, it's nobody can do anything with that. But if people are willing to bow and prostrate themselves, then there's plenty of room for everybody. People can breathe, people can think clearly and freely, people are free to express their opinions. So in that kind of a sense, when everybody's rigid, there's no room. But when people are prepared to bow and acknowledge other people, whether they disagree or not, just to acknowledge them. I hear what you're saying. That's a big deal. I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying. When that doesn't happen, everything is rigid, but when it does, there's plenty of room for everybody. So I thought that was a really innovative interpretation of this. It doesn't explain the physical conundrum that it poses. Plenty of room, but everybody, there's no room for anybody, but there's plenty of room. So let me stop here before we move on to the next teaching. Any questions, thoughts, observations? Anything you want to ask about, share? It's a good time to take a sip of water. Okay. So is that the cue to move on to the next one, I guess? Okay. So our teachings now, this is now in the Chabad website. This is chapter 5, Mishnah or teaching number 7. And so these teachings continue in this chapter, another lesson beginning with a number. So we've had 10s and now it's 7s. But in the remaining minutes, we're just going to concentrate on this particular teaching number 7. And it says there are 7 traits that are characteristic of an uncultured or uncultivated person. If they do one of these 7, you can tell they can use some social grace workshop kind of a thing. And we'll see what each of those 7 is. And the teaching will tell you, and one who is the opposite of this is the more cultured. So whoever does these 7 is uncultured, doesn't have a grasp of social amenities. But the one who does opposite these things, they are characteristic of those who have social amenities and know how to conduct themselves amongst other people. So again, it begins with a number, and again, it's anonymous, which is interesting. If you remember the first 4 chapters, Rabbi Akiva said, this one said, this one said, there was always a name. This one said in the name of the other one who said, and now we're all of a sudden hit with anonymous teachings. And thank you for not asking me, why are they not anonymous? I guess that's the opposite of anonymous. How come we don't know? We don't know. Why don't we know who said it? I don't know. Not clear about that. So again, these 7 that I'm going to mention are indications of perhaps an unpolished character, and we'll see what each of those 7 are. Some say that these 7 ways are behavior guidelines for everybody. Some say they're only meant for scholars. And again, some say that no, for everybody. This is open season. Anybody can learn these and internalize these 7 ways to do or not to do certain things. These 7 qualities of the wise or cultured person are regarded by the famed Maimonides, who lived from 1135 to 1204, about 900 years ago or so. He considers these as fundamental. These are fundamental qualities of a cultured, socially aware individual. He divides them into 2 categories. 4 of the 7 are ethical virtues that are necessary in a person's relationship with others, and 3 are intellectual virtues. These are sound principles for clear thinking and a person's development. So here's number 1. There are 7 of them. We'll try to do all 7 in the next 15 minutes. Number 1, a wise and learned person does not begin speaking before one who is greater in wisdom and in years, meaning someone more educated and older than him. Somebody who has good characteristics will let others who are wiser and older talk first, if we were to summarize that. It's hard to know how to read the phrase exactly. Does it mean to say that don't talk or express an opinion or teach if there are people there who are older and wiser? You should hesitate to speak or teach just because there are older and wiser people there? Is that what it means? And if they don't speak up, you shouldn't say anything? If so, your innovative and creative approaches to a certain topic at hand might never get aired, and everyone would miss out. So is that what it means? If the older ones and the wiser ones don't say anything, you should just sit there and be silent with whatever you have to offer? I don't know. So not sure what that means. Or does it mean that in the pecking order of the status of people at a meeting, or you're in a class, you're in a workshop, whatever, that you should wait till the wiser ones speak first and then you should speak? Maybe that's what it means. Just wait till they speak first, and they both sound similar, actually. Wait till the older and wiser ones speak first, and then you can say something. But you would ask yourself, if you're the youngest in the room, and they don't offer whatever they should offer, and the wiser and the older don't speak, does that mean you never get to say what you have to say that you might feel could be valuable to other people? So it has its debate. What exactly does it mean? Not until the older and wiser say something. I think the basic understanding is that a wise person allows the one with greater wisdom to speak first, or someone who is older. So you see a few hands go up in a meeting, a workshop, that kind of an environment, and you really have something that you want to contribute. You feel others would gain from it. You look at all the other hands. Let's say the chairman calls on you. Okay, what did you want to say? But you've seen the other hands go, well, I'm happy to share what I have to share, but I see that blah, blah, or the older one, or the wiser one, I see their hands went up too, and I'm more than happy to relinquish my first comment or question to them. Maybe that's what it means. Could be. So does it mean we ought to respect those with greater life experiences and more insight gained through their years and decades of life? I mean, the truth of the matter is, older people generally have a rich and a deep reservoir that often remains untapped. You know, the older you get, the less we necessarily want to hear from you, because we don't know if you're all there, all with it, if you're understandable, how's your memory, and all that. So we tend to be easily dismissive of people older. And maybe this teaching is saying, no, just go to them first. Give up your spot, let the other ones talk first. And if that's what it's teaching, good. I think it's a nice lesson. Very nice lesson. A second teaching, the second of these characteristics of people who are either uncultured or undercultured, if you will. A wise person doesn't interrupt a person when they are speaking. They wait for the speaker to finish, and thereby according them the respect they deserve. Just wait till they finish speaking. Uh, so when we first arrived in Israel, I did 5 years of a radio show. It wasn't a radio show that you get in the car. It was a internet radio show. It was all about derech eretz, how to be kind, compassionate, decent, a mensch, a good human being. And I often interviewed well-known people, and my first question to them was always, so, what do you think is the state of derech eretz today? You know, in general, do you feel that we're kind to each other, compassionate, nice, sweet, sensitive, empathetic? And, you know, they would answer it in whatever way they evaluated the derech eretz atmosphere at their time. But I mentioned the fact that I did 5 years of a lot of interviews, and very often interviewers butt in. They butt into when the person is talking. Even though they ask the question, the person is responding, and they butt into the response. And some people find that that's a good way to do an interview. You know, you just break in and move on to something else that you might be interested, or not let them finish because you have something more focused to ask about that you really want to hear what is their opinion on that. I found myself, you know, I'm no great interview. I'm no Barbara Walters or some of these other great ones. I found that the more people talk, the more I let them talk, the fruits of what they had to say was in the latter comments. But as I'm listening to them, I'm saying to myself, this would be a good time for me to butt in because it's enough already. I got what I needed, but I let them talk. And very often, the more they spoke, the more rich their responses were because they felt comfortable enough that nobody would jump in on them. And that's part of the trick, in my opinion. Let people feel comfortable so they can feel like all the time in the world. Otherwise, you feel like you have to talk in sound bites, and I don't think it's as rich. It's good for headlines, but it's not as rich if you really want to get to the heart of the matter. So that's a wise person doesn't interrupt when others are speaking. It could be seen as quite arrogant to suggest that what you have to say is more important than what the current speaker is saying, whether or not you intend to leave that impression or not. It just looks that way. And if you remember the recent one of the recent debates, I guess it was with the vice president then, and was it with Joe Biden or was it? I remember with who? Kamala Harris. She had that famous line, "I'm talking, I'm talking." Do you remember this? I'm talking. Whoever she was debating with was constantly butting in. I don't know if it was Trump or Biden, something like that. And she reminded, "Excuse me, I'm talking now." And I think this is what the second teaching is trying to say to us, that don't butt in because somebody else is talking. So don't show your impatience at being interrupted. I enjoy listening to talk shows on the radio and hearing what people have to say about the topic of the day, whatever it is. And it's often the case that the host, or the guests and the callers, they descend into what I consider intolerable discord with everything that they talk about. They're over talking each other. They don't let each other finish. That is my cue to press the next button on the car radio. I cannot tolerate it. So what do you think? Yep. Over talking. Next button. The next button is often an Arabic button. They're all speaking Arabic. I'll say, I'll pick up 2 minutes of Arabic. It beats the discord that I'm listening to on this other station. So it can be very, very annoying when people butt in and they interrupt, etc. And it's the same thing happens in congressional hearings, parliamentary debates, where there's disrespect in not letting somebody complete a thought. Let them complete their thought before you butt in. By the way, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, if you ever want to take a group of kids from a classroom and show them respect and common decency, do not take them to the Knesset. I don't know where they picked up this debating amongst each other. They call each other nasty names, butting in. They scream things out from their seats to the person at at the plenary podium, scream things out. Yeah, you're a killer. You're a murderer. So we have little instances of that at State of the Union addresses where somebody might yell out something, but it doesn't happen often. So that's another characteristic of a wise person is they don't butt in, they don't interrupt, they let people talk. A third characteristic, a wise person doesn't answer impetuously, but they listen carefully and with consideration of what's being said, and they weigh the merits of what they hear, and then they give an answer. Now, society doesn't give room for that. We want instant. How do you feel about the war? Do you think that is it a good idea how do you feel about that murder in Minnesota? How do you feel about that? Sometimes you need time to think about questions like that, but we don't allow it. You may disagree. I think as a society, we don't allow it. Oh, here's the question. I want the answer now. Now, give me the answer now. And if you're not sure about the answer, if you say, give me a few moments to think about it, oh man, you're going to be on the next barbecue at the Holy Temple. So we don't necessarily care for that kind of time lag that allows people to think and consider and weigh. So you would say, well, didn't they think and consider and weigh? Did they think this would be a question? Maybe they didn't. Maybe it's a new issue that just happened last night. Give people a chance to breathe and think and consider and form an opinion before you respond. So if I ask for an opinion about weighty issues or deep philosophical issues or spiritual issues, and I'm interested to hear the feelings and the opinions, don't shoot from the hip. I want to hear a considered opinion. Personally, I don't need to hear it quickly. I want to hear what do you got to say? How are you mulling that? What are you considering? What are you weighing? But I think, again, as a society, in my opinion, we don't allow for that. We want quick, instant, now, chat GPT, and all that. Yeah. So I wrote here in my notes, speaking of congressional or parliamentary or campaign debates, we don't give the courtesy to allow participants to think or consider. We expect quick response, and a wise person thinks before they respond. Teaching number 4 out of 7. A wise person asks relevant questions that are pertinent to the discussion at hand. Don't introduce a whole new topic. I know this is not what we're talking about, but I get that all the time from my high school girls. Rabbi, I know this is not what we're discussing, but I have a question. So now I have a choice to make. Do I take the question or do I say leave it to the end? By which time they may not remember their question, or it may not come across as passionately because they've lost some wind because it's now minutes later. So what do I do about that? I have to say, in my rabbinic career as a rabbi over 25 years in America, standing in front of congregations, this was one area of just ask relevant questions. This was one area I did not, monitor well. For me, as a teacher and a spiritual guide, when I gave a sermon or a homily, the congregation knew that they could interrupt at any time, and I would pause in my remarks to take a question. Even if they would say, Rabbi, this has nothing to do with what you're talking about. Hi, Guy, nice to see you. This has nothing to do with what you're talking about, but I have a question I'd like to ask. So unless I'm really deep into something and I need to continue a little bit more, I would say, okay, I'm happy to stop here. What is your question? And the Israeli way of saying, let me finish, is this. It's 4 things like that. That's the way you communicate. Just, give me just a moment, just a second. You often don't even have to say those words. Somebody will say blah, 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 and you go, that already means can you stop for a second and let me think for a moment? But whenever they wanted to interrupt, unless I was in a crucial part of my sermon, like the end, I would let them. Of course, I would be hesitant sometimes, but this was the kind of a way I established that rapport with the congregation. And why would I pause? I've got something to say. I'd like to say it. You have a question that out of left field. It's not that it's a silly question. It's just got nothing to do with nothing. Why would I, uh, what would be my guidelines to permit that question or not permit that question? So, um, my feeling is that if their curiosity has made them so anxious to raise their hands and want to get educated about something, I am not going to miss that opportunity. They have a curiosity, and this is a huge teachable moment. Wow, to be where you are at this moment that caused you to ask that question, I want to be there. I want to grab that teachable moment and see what I can do with it, rather than not have you ask it or ask it minutes later when you might have forgotten all about it. This curiosity, again, is a teachable moment, and I'm not anxious to let the helium out of the balloon. I want to grab that moment now. But there is another side to this, and I see that we're going to have to wrap up maybe with this teaching, and then we'll continue next week with the rest of it. There is another side to this, and this is from the Midrash. This is not written in the Torah anywhere. I read an article in a Jewish educational journal that spoke of a teacher-student relationship and issues, the different issues that come up. One teacher wrote in their letter to the editor, I have a student who often raises their hand to ask a question, which has nothing to do with anything being discussed, and they admit it. This has nothing to do with anything but may I ask. Should I stop and let her ask, or should I say all questions at the end? And this was the answer, and the answer is from a Midrash teaching. The answer was, only take the questions on the subject at hand, and then say later, when you finish that topic, now I'm ready for questions. But the reason given was something that came from a teaching in the Midrash about the Ten Commandments. And the teaching says, and again, it's not in the Torah explicitly, this is a commentary on the Ten Commandments and the Torah, that when God gave the Ten Commandments, between each commandment, a certain delicious fragrance was released. Command number one, I'm the Lord your God, to take you out of the land of Egypt, to take you out of the house of bondage, fragrance. Now, what was that fragrance? I don't know. Would I love to know what that fragrance is, or could it be replicated? Wow, imagine that. But after each of the Ten Commandments, there was a certain fragrance. Was it the same between all 10, or each one was different? I don't know. That fragrance lingered, and the people associated commandments with a sweet and irresistible fragrance, which is a beautiful, clever image. The next commandment began only when the previous fragrance dissipated. And when you could no longer discern that fragrance, God gave the next commandment. So this is the teaching that this rabbi imparted to the person who wanted to know, should I take the question or leave it at some other time? So when this topic is done, he says to the teacher, then you can ask an unrelated question. When the fragrance of this discussion has quit, it's open season before the next topic. It's an interesting way of using that imagery. The same way there was a fragrance, and until it dissipated, nothing continued. Same thing, you continue as a teacher the topic that you have. Let the fragrance of that topic, now that you've completed it, linger a little bit. And now we're happy to hear Tova ask her totally unrelated question. The bottom line is, I think both are valid. Both ways of handling such questions are valid. But it's interesting that one rabbi used the imagery of the fragrance and the Ten Commandments to answer it, instead of just saying, no, you should finish your topic and then. It's always nice to inject a Torah thought into an opinion. I think that's a very beautiful thing. Okay, so this is where I end tonight. I hope you found it interesting and inspiring and educational. Anybody have a parting thought, a question, observation? Because now there's no topic on the table, so now there's just fragrance. All we have is fragrance. But I'm happy to hear any closing questions or observations. Anything you'd like to share?
I don't want to speak too quick, so I'll save my question for next week.
Say that again.
I don't want to speak too quick, so I'll save my question for next week.
Oh, do you want to just ask it or and then we'll
No,
mull it?
no, I'm just saying I don't want to, say something, right now because I have to think on it, right? I'm a wise
Oh, okay.
person thinks.
Oh, did I just violate one of these principles by asking? Oh, yeah, so sorry. What a teacher. What a teacher. He violated his.
Hmm.
Okay, God willing, we can wait till
I have
next
an
week. We can
observation.
wait till next week. Not a problem.
I have an
Uh,
observation.
yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
The
If you just unmute yourself.
I'm not muted.
Stephen is muted, but you had your finger up.
I'm sorry,
I'm
I
not.
did. No, I'm sorry, I don't have a question.
Oh, you don't have okay.
No, sir. No.
Would you like a question?
I can hear Steven. I don't think Steven's muted. I can hear
Oh, no, I
Steven.
could just hear him now a moment ago too. Yeah. Thank you. Anything,
Guy,
Can you hear me?
any
Guy
other
Smith,
parting thought? Yes, Bob?
Yeah.
Guy Smith is trying to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Guy, go ahead. He's a good
Can you
guy.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I think it depends on the person. This last subject, sorry I got in late, but you know
It's
how it
okay.
goes.
Happy to have you.
Um, because what I have in my experience, um, usually I've been able to perceive people when they're not paying attention to what's going on and their brain is someplace else, and they raise a question because they're thinking of something else, not listening to what's going
Ah,
on. And again, it all depends on the person.
when you
I
say it
can
depends
see
on the
where
person, is the person the teacher or the person the listener? When you say it all
the
depends
listener,
on the listener, it all depends on the
okay,
listener. Yeah.
right?
No, sometimes most of the times I can also tell when they're invested, listening, giving it their time and attention. We have some girls that are into makeup. And while I'm doing the class, they say, is it okay to put on some makeup while they're putting on, lipstick? And I would say, frankly, and I don't mean to be personal, it would be better if you used a glue stick rather than lipstick. But, with me, it's okay. I asked the other teachers, do you have that? And they say, yeah, some of the girls, that's the way they listen. Little Max Factor and the ears open up and whatever. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, I find out when I ask them questions or on a test, they do beautifully. So maybe that's how they listen. Some people listen best or do homework best with music on and all that. Everybody's got their own way of hearing and listening. But yeah, a lot depends on the teacher, the student. Everybody's got their own character and yeah. So Robert, what did you want to say?
Yes, Rabbi. As the speaker in the past, I've always found it to be very important. If I'm imparting knowledge, I wait until the end, or the listener should wait until the end. And if they interrupt, I give them their second or two, much like how Guy was speaking uh, along that line, and then I continue. And sometimes silence or ignoring the question until the end is a pretty good, especially when you're speaking to numbers of people. It is always wise to do it something similar to that, depending on the individual, than to confront a person um, in a classroom or whatever setting of,
Right,
let's say, 30 or more people. So
right.
wisdom tells me
Oh,
as I speak, am I imparting knowledge or is this open for discussion?
very nice. It's a very good observation. Yeah, I think you're right. It's what am I doing up here? You have to ask yourself, what am I doing up here? One of the things that I think I mentioned just within the one word impetuous. I try to steer my students, whether it's adults, teens, whatever, I try to steer them away from a quick response.
Right.
So often we have moral and ethical dilemmas. I'll have a series of moral and ethical dilemmas and say, how would you respond? So a hand goes up, you know, and I would say, I see that your hand is up. I would really love it if you would just give it a couple of moments of thought.
Yes.
Just, I'm not interested in the impetuous response. I'm interested in the considered response, you
Very
know,
good.
as you weigh things. You didn't just weigh it in the last half second. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes people
Last thing,
have ready-made responses because they've been asked this before or they've encountered
yes.
it before. But in general, and I taught this to my girls as well. I don't know if they still do it. I would ask them a question. We would study together. Why do you think that Moses, blah, blah, blah?
Mhm.
Oh, because no, I would say, I see you have an answer. If you just take 2 minutes, think about the question, and then let's talk about it.
Very
But
good.
I think both ways are, depending on who the listener and who the speaker is, both ways I think are valid. They have their valid points.
Yeah. Last thing I'd like to say along that same line, impulsive behavior. You got to know your audience. If your audience is geared toward impulsiveness or they're familiar with you, then you have to take the appropriate action at that time period. But that's important. Know your audience.
Oh, so this will begin, we'll include this teaching that we learned in one of our earlier classes that says, know before whom you stand,
Mm,
which is meant to inspire people to sense that there is the presence of God and they're standing in front of God when they pray and they're not, don't diddle with your iPhone and don't do this and don't do that. Know before whom you stand, and that will help you focus. So, but that also applies to people who are in leadership positions who need to impart something, teach something, share something. Know before whom you stand, you can't overestimate or underestimate. You have to, every audience, I'll end with this, every audience has its strike zone. Do you know what I'm saying? Every
yeah.
audience has its, and before you speak to an audience, whoever asks you to speak, say, tell me something about the people coming. Who are they? Uh, we're going to be in Ramat Beit Shemesh for Shabbat. It's about a half hour from here. And I'm giving a class on something. I haven't determined the topic yet in the afternoon to this congregation. I've been there before. I've taught there before. Uh, but were this to be my first time, I would have to ask the rabbi who's allowing me to give this 1 hour class in Shabbat afternoon. I would say to him, just give me a sense of who I'm talking to. Are these, Jewishly educated, not so Jewishly educated? And I have to, what's the strike zone of this congregation? So I have a sense of what am I walking into? Who are they? You know? So I think that's a very important thing. Know before whom you stand applies not just to God, but it applies to any audience that you might be sharing with. Yeah, that's true. Okay, listen, thank you for staying this long. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming. You should all be happy, healthy, and safe, I guess is a good way to put it. Happy, healthy, and safe. You should have a Shabbat Shalom. And good to see everybody. And feel free to give any private messages, voicemail, text, whatever, about what you feel you'd like us to continue. If you'd like us to continue when we're done with Pirke Avot, we don't have a lot left. Any special topics that you want to address, or do you want a shorter time period? Maybe 45 minutes is good. Maybe an hour is long, whatever. If you have any feelings about what you want to do next, just let me know and try to incorporate everybody's opinion. So, again, thank you for coming, and
Thank you, Rabbi.
always a
Bye.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Bye.
always learn more from my students than they learn from me, as they say. So just be well and take good care of yourselves.
Shavua Tov.
Everyone, be well.